Hey guys, Three and Out has its own YouTube channel, and we plan on doing coward type numbers. Here's the key. If you're watching this, you like our content, make sure you subscribe. Subscribe to the page, leave a comment, interact with our stuff. We do stuff on this page on a daily basis. 365. Three and Out podcast right here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe right now. What a night for the National Football League. Drew Lock in Seattle pull off a miracle up in the Northwest against the Philadelphia Eagles, who have officially lost 3 straight games. There's a lot to talk about. I just watched Drew Lock almost cry in his post-game press conference. The Eagles press conference probably going on as I'm speaking. That's going to be a weird one. And what a game for the first ever Flex Monday Night Football game. We'll dive into that, as well as some stuff on the Bills. Something that happened today with Kazee, the safety for the Steelers. Tom Brady commented on Instagram, and I got to agree with him. And some thoughts on the Cowboys, Robert Saleh, the Niners. A lot going on football-wise. We will dive into it all. What a great time. I mean, it's Christmas time, football games. It feels like every single day of the week. It does not get any better than mid to late December in the NFL. So let's dive into some football talk. But first, here's what I need you to do. I need you to grab your smartphone or your iPad. Go to your app store. Download the official ticketing app of this podcast. They happen to be called Gametime. When you download the Gametime app, you can buy tickets to anything. An Eagle game, a college football game. You want to go to a bowl game, NHL game, NBA game. I saw the Lakers. They just raised the in-season banner. I can't believe they did it, but they did it. But if you live in Southern California and want to go watch LeBron, I got you covered. Go to Gametime, buy a pair of tickets. Give it out as a present, and use the promo code JOHN. Promo code JOHN, $20 off your first pair of tickets. Really, really easy to use. Very interactive ticketing map. You can look at the seating chart, see the angles, see the price points. I've used them countless times this year. I will use them for the foreseeable future. Love my friends at Gametime. Download that bad boy. Promo code John. Give out a Christmas present. Don't even thank me. Hammer that promo code. I don't even know what to say. I'm pretty speechless. I thought when the Seattle got the ball back, things might get weird. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect Drew Lock to throw a dot to DK down the sideline and then hit Jackson Smith in the end zone. That's insane. And listen, before we dive into the game, the NFL got a lot of blowback internally from the teams, from the coaches. I don't think the players necessarily care, but, team executives flexing Monday Night Football. Never forget, this league exists because of us, the fans that sit on our couch and watch football. And the reason that they made this available, the Flex Monday night game, is so we do not have to watch Belichick and Bailey Zappi. Because that's what would have happened, play the Kansas City Chiefs. They flex that game. We get Seattle, which is an incredible night primetime environment. The rain, the cold. You get the Eagles, trying to battle for the number 1 seed, and you get that. It never disappoints. That was, listen, I didn't have money on today. I was kind of rooting for Seattle, want to see the Niners get the number 1 pick. Also, just clearly things are getting weird in Philadelphia. And Drew Lock, listen, you got to give the guy his flowers. And this is why I'm so hard on the Pittsburgh Steelers. How can you have Mitch Trubisky as your backup? Like, how can you like that guy? Like, listen, Drew Lock is not a perfect player, but he's a pretty good backup. He clearly is really physically gifted. He battled maturity issues, which Aikman talked about tonight on the broadcast. How clearly in Seattle, he's grown a lot. They like him a lot. And to come in and have the ability to be that final drive to make those throws, I mean, that's big time. That go route to DK down the sideline that ultimately led to the touchdown was perfectly thrown. The ball to Jackson Smith was an absolute dime. Might even be a better catch. Just an awesome moment for the guy and just a cool moment for the NFL. Now, if you're an Eagles fan, listen, I will defend the Eagles on this. they didn't just demote Vic Fangio, Todd Bowles, or Bill Parcells. They demoted a guy, I checked his resume, who was a quality control guy for about 7 years in the NFL before working his way up, getting fired, and last year he was a special assistant on the staff, kind of like Patricia is. He got his shot, and anytime you have a veteran-led, kind of star-driven team, think about who their leaders are on defense. Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Darius Slay. You're not making a move. Like, the Eagles aren't just haphazardly throwing shit at the wall and hope it sticks. Clearly, the players weren't on board. And there was a story that leaked today that, like, the defensive coordinator lacked a little confidence. Maybe he doesn't feel comfortable. He knows what he's doing. Because I watched the Eagles defense all season long, and they have been pretty bad. Now, they still have major flaws. Their players aren't good enough. It's really that simple. With Slay out having knee surgery, Bradbury, who is a major weakness, there's a reason that Debo never shut up for a year. Debo thinks, because the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan taught him last year going to the NFC Championship, that James Bradbury is not very good. And if you watched last week, if you watched 2 weeks ago against the 49ers, and if you watch tonight, they went at him relentlessly. So when you have a corner, and listen, he's highly paid, who's not any good, and who can't cover anybody, I don't care if the offensive coordinator is Bill Walsh, Mike Shanahan, or me, you are going to throw at that guy over and over and over. Honestly, Patricia, he held him to 13 points, 58 minutes of the game. Like, he's fine. I'm sure he is an upgrade over the guy they demoted. I don't have a big issue. The media hates when you don't tell them stuff. So it's like, why was it so cloak and dagger? Sorry, they just didn't send out a memo to the league. That's not the way it looks. Hell, Pete Carroll tonight didn't tell you who his starting quarterback was up until like 25 minutes before the game. Even though they knew, as Drew Lock kind of alluded to after the game, Drew Lock knew when he showed up at the stadium tonight, he was starting. It's football. It's gamesmanship. It's like, you don't just tell your competition everything you're going to do. The media gets up in arms. That's the way it works. But I don't care if Bill Parcells had been the defensive coordinator tonight. There's nothing you can do when you have major weaknesses in your secondary. And James Bradbury and some of their other corners aren't very good. It's just that simple. Now, the one thing this Eagles team last year, well, I'd say Bradbury was a little better, and obviously Slay was there, and they weren't as banged up with their other corners, and their defensive line dominated. The Eagles have never been like Brian Urlacher and Fred Warner and Patrick Willis at linebacker. Like, they don't value linebackers that much. They really value the defensive line. And last year, that defensive line eviscerated people. And you watch tonight, like, Jalen Carter had a cool sack. But for the most part, like, where is this on Reddick? Where are guys making play? Brandon Graham had a sack, but for the most part, they are not relentlessly getting pressure. And the easiest way to make a guy like Bradbury look capable is to constantly pepper the quarterback. Well, on that final drive, it didn't even feel like they got close to Drew Lock. So in the NFL, if you have a guy with the talent that Drew does have and the arm strength that he has, which he clearly showed in that final drive, if you don't touch him, like, he can make some throws. And he clearly did. And one thing that you will say about Seattle, and they are a flawed team. They to me are, pre this 14-team playoff, back when it was just 6, I don't think they're a playoff team. But with 7 teams in, I'd have to look at their schedule. Hell, they might still be able to get in. They feel more like 8-7 than they do 9-8. But listen, offensively, here's what they got. 3 sweet wide receivers. They have the modern version. He's not as good, but DK is like a TO, just a physical freak who can run like faster than anyone in the league except 5 guys and has good ball skills. You have Tyler Lockett, who's been one of the most consistent wide receivers in the league. And you have Jackson Smith, who's a first-round pick, who's clearly an elite talent. Like, that's a big-time wide receiver core. And the Eagles' defensive backs, 1, they struggle to cover, and 2, they're not great tacklers. Like, one thing Seattle do defensively is not very good statistically. Their DBs will hit you. They are a physical unit, and you felt their presence tonight. Like, you watch the Eagles and you go, where's your physicality? Even linebackers, like, they're just not, their back 7 is not physical. And to me, Seattle was taking it to them a lot of the game because the Eagles aren't a great tackling team. And there's no like drills you can do in practice. This isn't peewee football or high school football. Schematically, I'm sure Patricia is much more advanced and better than the guy they had. But it's where did I hear this tonight? That someone said, oh, it was on the pregame, and it's so stupid. It was it wasn't Booger, it was Swagoo, and he said defense is all about effort, and I was like, yeah, kinda. In the NFL, you got to play with effort. Good players play with effort, but it's also a lot about scheme. So it's a combination of effort, talent, and scheme. This is the highest level of football. Play calls, talent, effort, it all is molded into one. And to me, like the Eagles, I don't think they're not playing hard. I think their scheme looks fine. But if you don't have the talent, and their guys to me just don't look talented enough. Like it was advantage Seattle with their wide receivers. And for most of the game, they're not like Drew Lock's not a great player. So he's not going to throw 300 yards in a rainstorm, just like Jalen. Like it was hard to throw for yards tonight. But in those spots, and have to have it when you're just like, fuck it, we're throwing it to DK, you're at a disadvantage. And James can't run with him. And clearly he was a liability. And listen, we've all watched football long enough. In this modern day game, when you have a major liability at corner and you're playing big time wide receivers, you are at a huge disadvantage. It does not matter who's calling the plays. It doesn't matter how hard you're playing. Now, can you quote unquote double a guy? I guess you can, but they have multiple other wide receivers that can make big plays. So it becomes very difficult. You do need your corner to at least be functional out there and give you a chance. And down the stretch, Bradbury got eviscerated. He got destroyed. To me, he lost them the game because you can't hide that. And he's better than probably anything else they have. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And the answer is you can't do anything. You really can't. And tonight, a huge difference in the game was the DBs for Seattle made a couple big plays. I'm not even counting the final pick, which was also a big play, but he made another big pick in the end zone. Like, I just don't see the Eagles making big plays in the back seven. And their defensive line is not consistently dominating enough. Who's the best defensive lineman on the field? Leonard Williams. That guy tonight, if you didn't know anything about football and tonight was your first game of the season, you'd be like, is Leonard Williams the best defensive player in the league? He was awesome. Now he's playing a backup guard, but still, he was all over the place, physically dominating the point of attack. And for Seattle, who to me is kind of Swiss cheese typically on defense, they were flying around tonight and they were playing hard. Now, obviously, the Eagles, Jalen is sick, shows up, takes a private plane with Big Dom, not feeling well. But I actually thought for the most part, he's playing pretty well. Did the one pick, toward in the second half to Love, the first one, little underthrown, could have called PI, but listen, we can blame the defense all we want. Their offense scored 17 points. You should be able to score 25 plus against the Seattle defense. Now, you could argue when Jamal Adams is not in the game, he's like their version of James Bradbury. You don't necessarily have an enormous weakness. Really, honestly, Seattle's big weakness, the linebacker, Bobby Wagner, all-time great player. Their linebackers aren't that fast. So when you get them in space, it's why when Jalen's running around, there's no one even close because their team speed. Michael Lombardi has said this for a while, and it's so true. When your linebackers are fast, your defense is fast. And you watch both those two teams, their linebackers aren't fast. So their defense looks slow. It's just that simple. But big picture, enormous win for Seattle. I mean, if Seattle loses this game, they're done. Seasons is over. And still, they're no lock to make the playoffs. And this is just a devastating, kick in the nuts for the Eagles. I've been watching the Eagles for a long time. I would say this is the worst Sirianni loss. If you just think about on the road, you're winning. They get the ball back. Pete's pissed away a couple timeouts. They got to drive the entire length of the field. They have to score a touchdown. They have one timeout, and they score a touchdown. And honestly, they scored a touchdown with 28 seconds left. It's not even like they scored in walk-off fashion. So it's just an absolute devastating moment for the Philadelphia Eagles. And, a lot of the talk, things are going to get weird because the way they fired their defensive coordinator, which, like I said, have no problem with. Your team better than everyone else. We'll get into the Bills in a minute. Internally, the coaches, the players, your vibe even better than the fans and definitely the media. So you do what you got to do, but ultimately it's a black and white business. You either win or you lose. So you lose like this. Now, again, you have the same record as the Cowboys. Now, the Cowboys' schedule is still much harder. But listen, division games get weird. I've said over and over, I don't care how shitty the Giants are. It's not like Dayball and Wink Martindale aren't going to try to win those games. One of those games to me is a lock to get weird. And let's face it, the Eagles are just off. They are just off. And talent-wise, their back seven on defense is not that good right now. And the guy they have playing at corner in James Bradbury is not going away. Like, he has to play, but like, because he's your best option. But him being your best option doesn't mean he's a good option. He just kind of means he's your only option. And teams get into these positions sometime. To me, if the Eagles, clearly there's a physicality that, like, they're not even in the same universe as the 49ers. If they played the 49ers 100 times, I don't think they would win 10. And even the Cowboys, I think if they went back and forth, to me, and I know they just got their ass kicked by the Bills, but the Cowboys typically are just a more physical team than the Eagles. And, this is going to put a lot of pressure on Sirianni. He does not call the plays, right? He's a CEO head coach. So this is kind of what you pay him to do, right? It's like, well, motivate, figure it out, lead. This is a shitty spot. This is the NFL. 3-game losing streak. 49ers had one of those earlier this season. Hell, they almost fired their defensive coordinator. And they just kind of rallied together. They just figured it out. Like, this is a moment. The problem is that their 3-game losing streak went into the bye. So they got to take a deep breath. This 3-game losing streak, they play next week. Like, you got to figure it out. You got to figure it out fast. Leaking oil at rapid pace. You just lost in front of the entire country in devastating fashion. That city is just insane when it comes to the football team. They just tend to, where I come from, like when I hosted a radio show in the Bay Area, when the Niners start losing, like, people kind of zone out. They don't care. In Philly, winning and losing, like, people get just as excited for losing. Like, the fan base rallies. And I'm not saying that, like, in a way, like, trying to talk shit. Like, I appreciate that. In the business I'm in, the problem, if the Niners go 5 wins, no one cares. Eagles 5-win team, like, everyone has an opinion. Everyone cares. And it can turn negative fast. And there's going to be a ton of pressure. And I mean a ton of pressure on Sirianni to just figure this thing out. Like, are we looking at a team that's going to be back in the NFC Championship? Or are we going to looking at a team that's going to have to battle right till the end to win the division? And now clearly the 49ers still have a couple easy games left. They're going to be the 1 seed. So the Eagles, like, could they lose in the first round? Like, we have to see the way the seeding plays out, but, like, this thing can get weird and it can get weird fast. So ton of pressure right now, Sirianni. That's just one of those that's a tough one to shake. It really, it's one, you get your ass kicked. Like, fuck. Anyone bet in a fight, get your ass kicked, you just kind of shake it off, take the blood off your lip and just kind of walk the other way. It happens. No different in football. Sometimes you get your ass kicked, you get back on the plane, you eat a chicken sandwich, have a cold Gatorade, and just kind of shake your head. Just like, oh, show up to work tomorrow. When you lose these type games, it's like, what is going on? It's a jarring feeling as a team, as a coach, as a fan. If you watch tonight, your jaw had to hit the floor when he completed that touchdown to Jackson. Like, your jaw, because mine did. And I'm just watching it as a fan of football. It was one of the crazier moments, I would say, this season, especially when what was on the line, the team they were playing, Monday Night Football. It was awesome. And Seattle, listen, if they could ever figure out their defense, and which is crazy because Pete's a defensive coach, offensively, they are so loaded. I mean, DK, Lockett. How good is Kenneth Walker? Obviously, they got some young offensive linemen. Like, they got a lot going for them. But Pete, a little reckless with the timeouts. When Pete calls timeouts when there's going to be a delay game, like, Pete, just let the delay game happen and kick the field goal. You need that timeout. And then Sirianni throws the red flag, which he was right on. And then Pete's screaming at the ref, do I get my timeout back? No, Pete, you don't get your timeout back. Pete got very lucky because if Seattle had lost that game, that was a moment like, is Pete losing his fastball? Does the old man, is he still throwing strikes here? Because that was pretty embarrassing little stretch there in the fourth quarter of Pete just wiping his butt with timeouts. Like, hey, Pete, it's kind of a close game. Timeouts are kind of important. Now, he ultimately got lucky, partly just because DK and Drew Lock made some plays, but holy moly. And I know there are a lot of Seattle fans who aren't in love always with Pete. Tonight was not his finest moment, but he won, and his team's still alive, and ultimately, what a game. NFL fans, it's time to unwrap nonstop football action. This holiday season, throw down on the big matchups with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. This week, new customers can bet just $5 on the NFL and score $150 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook now with code JOHN, J-O-H-N. New customers can bet $5 on the NFL action to score $150 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. I was thinking today about the Bills because, having worked in football and now being on the outside, when you're inside, it's you kind of live in this bubble of the team. It's easy to justify weird shit. Even when things start kind of falling off the rails, you think you can figure it out. All it takes is a win, and everyone, it's pretty contagious. Yet on the outside, it's easy to think like building is on fire, especially when an article comes out like the one that came out on Sean McDermott, on the 9/11 thing, which to me would have been, listen, it's a crazy thing to say, but it was from 2019. It's not like it was from 3 weeks ago. So the way everything was going on, a lot of teams could have just imploded. And let's face it, a lot of adversity, when you just think about it like your family, some adversity like breaks families. I've seen it, right? Over wills, over bad things that when people get sick, it's easy to fracture. And I've also seen a lot of families come even closer together and get stronger. It's no different with a football team. When shit hits the fan, a lot of bad teams usually just fracture, right? They all go their separate ways. They all start talking shit and pointing finger about the other guy. And then the team just starts losing over and over, and you become the Chargers, and you lose 63-20 on Thursday Night Football against the Raiders, right? That happens a lot. Like the Chargers by no means are an outlier in that situation. But sometimes, especially when you have talent and you have pedigree, when something crazy happens, you get closer internally. And did they get a little lucky beating the Chiefs? Of course they did. But that effort against the Cowboys, to me, that shows a team that still kind of believes. And I think the way that they beat the Chiefs and everything that transpired after with the Mahomes and all the conversation, I wonder if they're a lot tighter unit now. And me and Colin talked about it yesterday. When you look at their schedule, I think there's a very good chance of it coming down week 18, them and the Dolphins for the AFC East. And let's face it, if it does come down to that, that'll be the Sunday night game. Everyone and their mother is going to pick the Bills because ultimately the Bills' ceiling, what we witnessed yesterday against the Cowboys, is as high as anyone in the NFL beside the 49ers. And I said last week, I'm like, I don't believe in this Bills team because they play in the same game all the time. It's just a wacky game. They win some and they lose this season. Now, here's the difference. The last 3 years, everyone acts like, I think Sean McDermott is getting treated like he's some scrub coach. He's gone 13, 11, and 13 wins the last 3 seasons. The guy's won a lot of games. And he's had this team right on the precipice of like getting over the hump. Now, they had a devastating loss a couple years ago, the 13-second game against the Chiefs. But this is not, I think sometimes he gets talked about like he's Josh McDaniels or Brandon Staley. Like he's proven to be pretty damn good. And what he just did against Sean McDermott, he's also the defensive coordinator. So that defensive effort yesterday was him. That's his game plan. He's calling the plays against Mike McCarthy. He's the guy that had them under 100 yards the majority of the game. He's the guy that embarrassed the Cowboys. That's his defensive play calling. And obviously, Josh and Joe Brady, here's the thing. Anytime a coach wants to make a move, like sometimes it's out of desperation. Like Ron Rivera firing Jack Del Rio. Like everyone's getting fired. You just throw some guys off the boat. Like you're eventually going to get tossed off the boat too. And sometimes maybe things just aren't working. And you go, we need a change. And he goes to Joe Brady. And let's face it, the Bills have looked dramatically better on offense. In that game against the Cowboys, so now the defense has a high ceiling if they're playing well like they did against the Cowboys, and their offense is rolling. This is a team, and me and Stuckey have been talking about it for a while. If they get hot, watch out because they're the type team with that ceiling that can beat the Chiefs and beat the Ravens in the playoffs. Clearly, look around the AFC, I don't think anyone else can. The Bills, if they get in, if they run the table and win the division, I think a lot of people will pick them to win the AFC. And I think it'll come back to the moment when that article came out and everyone was trying to say the Bills were done. Sean was going to get fired. They were going to do a reset. and everyone banded and kind of, grew closer together. And that's a cool thing that happens sometimes in sports. And I think that might have been what we just witnessed on Sunday. Tom Brady said a while back that he thought quarterback play had never been worse. And, he got a lot of pushback from different people, especially, newer age people get very angry with that. And I'm sitting there on Saturday, eating a sandwich, drinking some water, watching the game. And Gardner Minshew, who is a fun player, he might throw more YOLO balls than any quarterback I've ever seen. And in the history of the league, a lot of his balls would have got guys carried off in stretchers. In the 80s and the 90s, would have got guys killed. Well, I've been saying this for a while. Football, I despise throwing guys out of games. This is not baseball where you play tomorrow. You only get 17 of these. And in 2023, I feel very confident saying nobody's trying to hurt anybody. When anyone makes a tackle, one, it's so easy in slow motion to think, oh, he lowered his head. Put pads on, put a helmet on, see how hard it is to put your head in front with the shoulder. It's bullshit. Every fat ass on their couch is always tweeting oh, that's chicken shit. He lowered his, no, he's trying to put his shoulder into the guy and tackle the player. Fred Warner was asked, I saw today by Pat McAfee, about the hip drop tackle. He's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I've never once thought about I got to wrap this guy up, drop my hips, and spin. I'm literally just tackling the guy and trying to get him to the ground. So when Kazee hit Pittman on Saturday and knocked him out of the game, the pass was a fucking joke. It was an awful throw. Historically in football, it's been called a hospital ball. That's what Minshew threw. And when Kazee started to go forward, he thought Pittman was up. And then Pittman has to lay out because, again, it's a terrible throw. And then as he's going down because he doesn't want to hit him high and he doesn't want to take his legs off, and his head and his shoulder come right into the guy. And I think it happens all the time. And the quarterback, no one ever talks about Gardner Minshew throwing his wide receiver into a death trap. It's always that guy is a headhunter. We need to get that out of the NFL. Let me tell you this. You know the reason why the NFL is throwing all these flags and now, suspending these guys for the season without pay? Litigation. They don't want to get sued for CTE ever again. So they can say in 10 years, in 20 years, here's everything we did. X, Y, and Z. Think about your company. Everything they do, they document with HR. It's the same logic. They're just covering their ass. They don't actually care that he didn't mean to hurt him. They don't actually care that it was a terrible throw. It's simply covering their ass, which I understand, but let's call it for what it is. And Tom Brady Instagram, does the quarterback ever have to take any responsibility anymore? And the answer is no. And I started thinking, I wonder if the reason that it's never been easier for these backups to excel in the NFL, you can kind of throw it anywhere, right? Because one, those hits are even very rare. So even if you throw hospital balls, no one's going to get injured for the most part. Hell, most DBs aren't even trying to hit you that way anymore because they fear getting in trouble. They fear getting fined. And you can just throw it wherever. It's literally never been easier. If that was 1997 and you were playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Pittman would be out for the season. He'd have a shattered clavicle. He'd be done. It used to happen all the time. And then you knew, and this is what Brady and Peyton and Breeze and all these guys forever, just in the most recent generation, but Young and Aikman have talked about forever. I had to be very, very careful where I put the football. Because if I put it in harm's way, I would legitimately get the guy hurt. And my biggest issue now is no one's trying to hurt anybody. People are just trying to tackle. It's been legislated out of the league. But where's the responsibility for the shitty throws? And the answer is there just isn't any. It's football season, and you can now get almost anything you need for game day delivery with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Can Uber Eats deliver foam fingers? No. But chicken fingers? Yes. Touchdown dances? No. Buttermilk ranches? Yes. Field goals? No. Grilling coals? Yes. Running backs? No. Ribs? Yes. Blitzes? No. Beers? Yes. Defense? No. Deodorant? Yes. Game-clinching turnovers? No. But pastry turnovers? You know the kind with delicious apple filling? Oh yeah. because that's groceries. And get those delivered with Uber Eats too, along with food from your favorite restaurants and other essentials. And the best part, you can get it all without missing a second of action on your TV. There you have it. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details. I do think, and Colin mentioned this the other day, everyone's going to overreact on the Cowboys. They get a great opportunity because that Bills team, they clearly went into the Hornets' nest. That team came together and they just got their ass kicked. But now they get Miami, who's going to be feeling themselves a little bit at home, which is a much better matchup for them. And then they get Detroit. Now, I'm not saying the Cowboys they're a lock to win these two games, but it's going to be a pretty easy opportunity for Dallas to get their swag back. They can go to Miami, they can win. Then they can play Detroit at home, where clearly they excel. And if they win that game, all of a sudden, everyone's going to be taking Dallas seriously again. It's the ebb and flow of football because one game means so much. It's why I'm so opposed to throwing guys out of games, because you don't just get to play tomorrow, right? Hell, for Kazee, he doesn't even get to play the rest of the season. But I think you got to be very, very careful about the overreaction to the Bills, especially when you look at the schedule. I think this is a huge game this week. I mean, this is the best part about the NFL. Fox has been very lucky this season. Basically, it feels like for the entire season, either the Cowboys, the 49ers, or the Eagles play a massive game in the afternoon slate. And, obviously the Cowboys and Niners have been carrying the league financially in terms of big television ratings for 30 years, and the Eagles are a massive brand too. So you're going to get a huge Cowboy-Miami Dolphin game, and I'll promise you this, I'm going to pick the Cowboys without hesitation. And that the following week against the Lions, I think that has a chance to be just a fantastic game. So it's an awesome little stretch for McCarthy to get the boys, get the train back on the tracks, and all of a sudden people being like, Dallas is the second best team in the NFC. Because I don't think anyone is going to say that about Detroit, no matter what they do, because they can't play outside. But Dallas does need to shake this. We can't play on the road. And they get an opportunity this week in Miami, which I'm sure will be a Dallas home game, and then play Detroit at home, which, that should be the type team that you light up the scoreboard on. Two more things. First and foremost, the whole Purdy conversation, do you know the saddest part about it all? He should really be the type guy that is really relatable to most people. Most programs didn't want him. Nick Saban was like, yeah, I guess you could walk on. I don't think you'll ever play here. He was the Arizona Player of the Year. He had to go to Iowa State, historically not some great football program. He turned the program around. He became an all Big 12 guy back-to-back years. The previous all Big 12 quarterbacks in that conference were Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield. I mean, it was a quarterback factory conference, and everyone's like, hey, he's still a 7th-round pick. This guy had been handed nothing. Everyone's acting like this guy just landed at home plate. He literally got drafted in the 7th round, had to make the team as a 3rd-string quarterback, and then because of injuries, just got his opportunity. He's actually more relatable to most of us than 1st-round picks who are just handed a bunch of money and handed starting jobs. Most human beings kind of have to earn their stripes and then get lucky with some opportunities and then take advantage of it. Okay, this guy can't make the meeting. Bill, we need you to go in. Shit, I've been waiting for this opportunity for 2 years, right? To me, Brock might be one of the most relatable stories in the NFL. And I see all these guys on television, especially the former players. A lot of them tend to be more famous guys. In a weird way, it feels like they hate it. It really does. It feels like a lot of those guys gravitate more toward the high picks becoming sweet, which, listen, I do too. I like a Myles Garrett and Aaron Donald, or Miles, Nick Bosa as much as the next guy. But I think stories of guys that are later round picks who become legit players are what make the NFL so great. It really is what carries the NFL. The overwhelming majority of NFL starters are guys drafted on day 3. And, it's the ultimate meritocracy in sports because anyone can make a team, anyone can earn a spot, and then anyone can become a really, really good player. And there's just so much negativity around the guy listen, I think a lot of it goes back to the draft pick. And I don't think that's going to change for the foreseeable future. Even if he wins the Super Bowl, it'll be the conversation next year. Well, can he do it again? If he was the 2nd or 3rd round or 2nd or 3rd overall pick, I think we talk about this guy like an absolute flat out star. And I've been watching the 49ers for 30 years, and the kid can fucking play. Now, I've said over and over, would I give the guy $200 million tomorrow? No, you got to do it a couple years. But this notion that he's not some like super high level player and he hasn't been at minimum, even separate from the MVP conversation, a top 4 or 5 quarterback this year, you're smoking crack if you can't see that and you've watched football season long. So I just think the conversation is just one of those things that solely exists because of his draft position. It really does, right? And that's just not going to change. And that's the hard part about the NFL is to get the not that it matters. Like the only thing that truly matters is do your teammates like you, do your coaches like you, and do you make plays? Like whether the former players on TV and the media pundits like you or not, who gives a shit? They don't pay your bills. They determine zero success for you. But it is just a conversation. This is the biggest league in America. It's talked about, and clearly he's a really polarizing guy. And like I said, it's all about being the last pick in the draft, which to me should be like a positive. It should be like an incredible part of the story. And it's just not right now for whatever reason. And last but not least, you know what's crazy is a lot of these offensive coaches are having success with like backup quarterbacks, right? Zach Taylor, Jake Browning, they're winning games. Kevin O'Connell's like won some games with Mullins and Joshua Dobbs. Stefanski's winning games with 70-year-old Joe Flacco. I mean, it's remarkable that he's won multiple games. Joe Flacco, like 5 years ago, wasn't any good. The version of Joe Flacco looks dramatically better than the Joe Flacco his last couple years on the Ravens. Shane Steichen with Gardner Minshew. So a lot of guys around the NFL, let's face it, the NFL this year is a little down talent-wise because so many quarterbacks are out. There's been a ton of injuries. You should be able to compete with a backup quarterback. That's why I'm so hard on the Steelers. Like, one, that's who your backup quarterback is. Two, and you can't even compete with the guy. But I'm watching Robert Saleh, and I believe they're all going to come back simply because they're going to give him a shot with Aaron Rodgers. But this has been a couple years in a row that they have just gone with quarterback situations, and they're just not even that competitive. And one thing I think we all have to acknowledge, their defense is a little overrated. Like, their defense is not as good as the hype because you can watch them some weeks like, the defense looks pretty, and then other weeks you're like, what the hell is going on? But to me, the main problem is I can give them Zach Wilson or Simeon or Mike White, and it looks way more difficult than it does for these offensive coaches. And I want Robert Saleh to be good, but I understand a lot of people are getting a lot of shit around me. I mean, Bill Belichick might get fired. Mike Tomlin might get fired. I'd be like, well, Robert Saleh just gets he just like, what's he doing? Well, not much. His team's not very good. They're probably destined to go 6 wins. So the last 2 years are probably have 13 wins in 2 years. And let's face it, it's been an ugly 13 wins. It's not like it's been a pretty watch. And I just think that this situation with their quarterback, he can't influence at all. He has no influence. And he clearly gets influence on his offensive coordinator. He hired a buddy, LaFleur, and now he's with Hackett because of Rodgers. And it's just been an utter disaster. So I do wonder, let's say they lose out, if he could be a wild card firing. Just because owners, we've talked about it forever, they have more money now than ever. It's all a line item to them. Like for you, if you have to like do something you don't want to do, pay a $25 late fee or like whatever, I'll just pay this to go away. If it's $100 for these guys, paying a guy $20 million to go away is like change you find in your sofa. It's just so meaningless to him. And Woody Johnson is just a wealthy owner to begin with. He's just a major wild card. I can see things getting weird. Now I know people like him. Like I think the best thing Robert Saleh has going for him is people legitimately like him, and it's just a good lesson. Like for some reason, a lot of guys in certain companies last a little longer even when they don't produce. Like, we really like Ted, just a good guy. It's like he doesn't do shit. Well, we just like having him around. It's kind of what we feel, at least what I feel like with Robert Saleh. Just people like the guy. But I think if you just go, well, is he a good coach? Is he a good head coach? I think if you were going to be objective, take a step back, no emotion, you'd have to say he's not very good. So yeah, we'll have to see how that shakes out if they keep losing. I wanted to end on this because I didn't know this until I saw a stat today on the interweb about Raheem Mostert. So my Morgan and Morgan player that made it look easy. It's not that shocking that Christian McCaffrey has 20 touchdowns. I mean, he had that streak that he almost broke of whatever, like 15 straight games with a touchdown. He's breaking 49er records. He might break the 49ers, Jerry Rice's record. He's been remarkable. I don't think most people know that Raheem Mostert has 20 touchdowns this season. 20 touchdowns. I've been following football since I can remember. And if you say a guy has like 12 touchdowns on the season, either running back or a wide receiver, that feels like an awesome year. If you get to like 14 or 15, decent chance you're going to lead the league in touchdowns. You get to the 20 mark, that is just, you're having a historic year. And to me, he's a good example. McCaffrey, it's not that weird. He was the 8th pick in the draft. McCaffrey could have gone to any team, and if he's healthy, he's going to be a star. He literally can do anything. Saw Coward call him maybe the greatest running back talent of all time. I would have him right up there with like LT, Marshall Faulk. He definitely is, with those guys, the most versatile running back of all time. Raheem Mostert's a guy that bounced around. If you just go to his Wikia page, his first couple years in the league, practice squad, cut, practice squad, another team, practice squad, bounced around. He's a great example of why fit matters so much. He got with Kyle Shanahan in like 2017 or 2018, and he never looked back. By 2019, he became the starting running back. He had that huge NFC Championship game. Obviously, Mike McDaniel is the run game coordinator. They become buddies. He goes with him to Miami. And now in 2023, with 3 games left, he has 20 touchdowns. This is a guy who was cut by countless teams. This is a guy that could not get off practice squads. Then he goes on to start an NFC Championship game and now be a guy who can be a playoff team's starting running back and give you 20 touchdowns. So props to Raheem Mostert for making it look easy. That's just freaking awesome. So if you're ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/John or dial #law, #529 from your cell. That's forthepeople.com/John or #law, #529 from your cell phone.